Hello again. It's Paul Rhodes from Green Gorilla Apps, Green Gorilla Automation, Green Gorilla Software. As usual, this is my 20-minute. Oh, my timer's going off. It's my 20-minute kind of just a straight to camera, one take update on how everything's going in terms of the week just gone. Looking ahead to what's around the horizon, what we're working on in AI, and then also thoughts and fears really. So I've got my little timer. I'm going to say it for 20 minutes. So that's down there. So I'll make a start now. So yeah, like I said, this came from, or the idea came from just a one take philosophy of just talk to camera, share some thoughts, some honest opinions. I do feel really low energy today. My Fridays are quite interesting. Technically, I don't work Fridays. We don't, we operate a flexible week, a 4-day week, so to speak. We don't mandate strict hours in terms of when, but we mandate the number of hours per week, and we're after quality work as well. So when people work is flexible. Why am I telling you all this? So Fridays for me have turned into pretty much like a content day. Which is a really interesting concept because I was talking to a good friend of mine, Jeremy, earlier today, and we were talking about how we've known for like years that we should be creating content. We were sort of talking about times back to sort of like 2010, 2011, when we know that content should be created and we should be doing this sort of thing. But it's took us like 15 years of hearing the message, the knowledge to actually execute. And we were just talking about why that is, and I think it's just so accessible now. So yeah, hopefully if this does one thing, it shows you that you can create content and it'll be far better than me. So it's end of play on a Friday. I really wish I'd recorded this earlier on, when the sun was shining. We've had beautiful weather in the UK for March, is insane. But yeah, I'm doing it as the sun's setting, so the lighting isn't great. But with the philosophy of, I'll get 1% better, I'll plow on, because I think it's more important to be consistent than it is to be perfect. And that's one of my big philosophies. And there's always got to be a better way as well, is another one. So in terms of what I want to talk about today, there's 3 things in the agenda. So I'll go through kind of what we've been observing over the past week or 2 weeks since I recorded the last one. My energy will pick up as we go as well. We'll talk about like trends that we're seeing in AI, and then we'll talk about some like kind of thoughts and around what it's actually like running a software company today in 2026 in March, and just some observations really. It's a weird thing because it's very what's the word? Monologue. It's really difficult to do. And I think when my energy is so low, I'm like, I'm really struggling today to kind of communicate effectively. So I have got my little pad down here. I'm not going to lie, I don't turn up to this without 3 bullets. And what was the reason I mentioned about the content day is just because we technically, yeah, there was a point to that, sorry, and then we'll move on. There's a point to it was, don't work Fridays, but I choose to work Fridays. So I'd rather work across the whole week. But effectively, the 4 days, Monday to Thursday, are client facing. They're when I have all my meetings, all my team meetings. But Friday for me is like a strategy, and it's turned into a content day. So for instance, typical Friday now is I'll go for a walk and kind of energize. That's been so important, such a big part of what I've been doing. I've been telling people how I've been recording like videos for LinkedIn. I plan my schedule of posts for the LinkedIn for the week, that sort of thing. And I get loads done on the walk. So I start with a walk. Episode 21 of the podcast that I do with Sean Sale, called Control Alt Dev, we recorded earlier, and we've just going to launch that on YouTube, which again is a massive difference to what we're doing. When it's audio, I really didn't care how much I was literally some days crawling out of bed and recording. And yeah, I had to have a shave this morning because I was so unkempt. So we did that and we recorded the video. So we're going to release that as a podcast that's on Apple and Spotify, but it's also going to be on YouTube from episode 21. And then we've just started another thing. It's probably worth just sharing where it's come from. I will talk about the other three things, but this is how my mind works. I've been part of something called Master Plan, which is run by Entrepreneur Circle, and it has different stages. There's like 9 steps to scaling a business. But one of them, step 6 I'm on, is about customer journey and prospect journey. And it's basically about rolling out and developing like a world-class system so that you're maximizing value for somebody being your customer. So yes, you can all deliver and compare to other people the service that you deliver, but how do you actually put like unique touches in there, and how do you remind them that you exist? Because you're not always servicing customers, even though they might be technically a customer. I haven't done justice of it, but one thing they talked about is they get to brainstorm. You know, I have a belief that if I'm in front of my customers more often, they get more value from our team, but also they do increase their spend and they do increase the number of times they buy and but also it's done on a completely mutual thing if they need to have those services. So one of the things I've toyed about for a while, probably over a year now, is this concept of creating like a weekly video exclusively for our clients, and much in the same vein of this, but a slightly different thing. So I've just started that. I've just launched that, and that's been on my to-do list for years, for probably at least a year. And what do I do? So every Monday I send an email to my clients to basically say I'm getting ready for the weekly client video. I did think about doing it originally as a webinar, but it's a very different thing to say get a nucleus of people onto onto a webinar at say 10 a.m. on a Monday. It's a massively different thing to just going, well, here's a video and I've answered your questions. So on a Monday, I send them an email with a link to a form in our CRM. I mean, it asks like 3 pertinent questions around bottlenecks and a week just gone, challenges in the business. They submit that form. And then basically Friday, I answer their questions. So today was the first one. I mean, I'm saying it like it's an established process, but it's fairly automated. And when I've talked about 10-80-10 in the past around AI, it's a good example because I probably spent 10% of my time architecting how I want it to work. There's like an automation, there's the emails that go out, there was like an intro video explaining it. There is there's a logic to the madness, and then but 80% of it is all automated. So 80% of it goes out every single week, or will go out every single week with the form. The form gets submitted, and then we've built an agent so that when the deadline clocks around during the week for submissions, it auto creates the basis of the agenda based on the questions that have come in. We had some brilliant questions get leveled at me today or through the week, and then I record the video, which is the 10% time, and then I basically again put it into the automation. It goes out. So the first one went out at 4:00 today with a link to the video, and a classic thing of you hope it's not a very good strategy, but you hope that people will watch it and get value. But I think it's all part of that process of all we really need now is a microphone. You don't even need a laptop, to be honest, but like a microphone and a decent camera. So that's where this originally that I started episode 4 now was almost like the precursor to that. Whereas on that video, I answer very specific. Like we had a brilliant a brilliant question come in this week that I was able to kind of give my opinion on. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but they were already given some advice, and whilst agreeing that I could see why they'd been given that advice, it was I don't think it was the root cause that they were addressing. So obviously it's hard for you to gauge when I'm not talking about specifics. So we'll move on, but the point of that was Fridays are going to be largely content for me from now on. And when I was talking to Jeremy, I was saying about, I remember years ago, Gary V saying, document everything. And at the time I was like, oh, I'm not brave enough. I care about what people think, or like, I don't know how. And it's all excuses. It's all BS. Isn't it? It's like everyone has an element of knowledge. Everyone has lived experiences. And actually, if you could just put all of that head trash to one side, there's got to be value in the way you see the world. And it won't resonate with some people, it'll resonate with others. So I guess that's that's the project that I'm embarking upon. And we had a meeting with our podcast editor, Pete, who runs Monkey Pants. It's the name of his company. And he was really good because when we started the podcast 20 episodes ago, he was we just said to him, the mantra like this is get 1% better every week. And he gave us some really good advice yesterday. And one piece of advice was don't ever go back and listen to episode 1 because it's supposed to be so horrendously bad. Like this video is, that actually it's about an archive of content, but within it is gems and nuggets. So yeah, I think there's a bit more insight there into, could you call it a creative process? I don't know, but into like why I'm doing this and some of the stuff we've been doing in the business to facilitate and provide more value for our customers. So regardless of when they last spent any money with us, they all get access to the same kind of like insights and stuff. So that's that. In terms of this week, I didn't mean to talk about that at all, and I've probably eaten up half the time. So again, viewer, listener, apologies. But yeah, what I wanted to talk about was just vibe coding. So obviously, as a bespoke software development company, traditionally, vibe coding is really interesting, is probably the way of putting it. So I think I might have said before that like more software will get created in the next 12 months than I believe ever in the history of humanity, because well, one, software's not been around that long, so that's quite a bold statement, but two, it's so easy. Like code is commoditized. You've got tools like Replit, you've got tools like Lovable, and then Claude is becoming so standard in most businesses I talk to. It's phenomenal, and there's a big transition I'm witnessing as well of companies who have started to build out Replit apps to do like micro applications, and then they kind of eject them and take them into Claude. So that's a really interesting trend I'm seeing. But one thing that we've been leaning into is this concept of code audits. So we had a guest on the podcast called Tim Winstanley, and he talked about like, well, actually, you've got all that experience. And so we know how to release production systems. There's quite a few systems we've done that are in universities like NHS. And I don't say that to brag. I just mean like there's a certain standard of kind of release, how the release process works in terms of GDPR, pen testing, like penetration testing, and security around everything that's done, and the governance and the compliance of everything. When people are using Replit, that's the last thing they're thinking of when they're creating functionality. So what we're getting exposed to is a number of businesses that come to us. It's really interesting. It's the business owner. So the business owners are spending hours developing these micro applications to create efficiencies in the business using these tools. One question is, where do they find the hours? Well, a lot of them is in the middle of the night. They're developing something that creates real value in the business. But then there's a huge knowledge gap between how do you take a prototype, which is what they're intended for, through to production and actual live data and scale. And that's where the paranoia and the kind of fear start to come in. So we've been working on just a simple process of code audits. So we can take these apps and we can run them through lots of different parameters, we've built like, systems that all look at, does the functional code meet the requirements, like the spec, like the PRD documents? We'll look at security, we'll pen test it, we'll look at the level of documentation, we'll look at unit testing, so that the amount of like automated tests within the system. And obviously when they're coming out of these kind of like, they're not even builders really. I don't know what they're classed as, but when it's coming out, it's very weak in certain areas, and it's almost like you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know the questions to ask it. So when you're in front of AI, you only have the lens at which you do anything. So it's the questions you don't know to ask that experienced people do, and that's the lens we're putting on it. So we're seeing a massive upsurge in these things called code audits. And then second to that is, okay, now you can do code audits and you can tell us what the issues are in like a red, amber, green scenario and the remediations. How do we actually take it to production? That's the next gap. So it's one thing being able to demonstrate micro SaaS or micro apps. It's another to be able to successfully launch and maintain them. And some of the common queries we're finding is that they've got a production workflow, but when they make changes, even though they're thinking they're doing it in like a development staging environment, it's breaking production, and it's because things aren't decoupled. So that's a real trend we're seeing. The other trend that kind of links into that, which is the AI pulse bit, is that these businesses aren't developing one micro app, they're developing a whole suite. And so traditionally, and I'll be totally honest, put my hands up. Traditionally, some of the software that we've written is what you'd call like monolithic. So someone will come to us to build like a portal, say in the medical sector, and we'd start with, it's a minimum viable product, it's an MVP. But over the years that we've worked on it, it's turned into a behemoth. Like it's a massive cathedral of functionality. And that's how traditionally web portals have been built. There's been microservices and there's technology that you can do to break it back down. But fundamentally, it's been that you go to like one place to access the functionality and get the value. Now, what's happening is because people can build these micro apps in Replit and Lovable and Claude really easily and really accessibly, they're ending up with, tens of apps. So then what they're doing is they're building command centers, and I've heard it called a Death Star. I think I coined it the Death Star in the Star Wars reference, mothership, command center. So it's almost addressing the efficiencies in the business through bespoke apps just for them that they can piece together, and then it drives everything. So all they're really doing is linking apps together, but there's real integrations happening between app A and app B and app C. It's fascinating to watch. As somebody who's come from like a software background and been in tech since '97 as a developer, I don't know why I did that. I was a developer. It's just mind-boggling, and I think the volume of software being developed, the vulnerabilities that exist in those software, the willingness to scale without real, like we call it DevOps, but like real deployment processes in there and protections so that things don't start breaking when they're out in the ether. And even where the data sits is just a massive one. And just having, I think development, this is my observation, I might be wrong, feel free to disagree. Development to me took a change in direction probably 10 years or more ago, but it's probably the last 5 years where people started to understand it from a expertise level. I've got to stop doing double quotes with my fingers. Is that, like a developer writes the code, and then there was this thing called DevOps that got separated from necessarily the developer, which was looking after the infrastructure, looking after the deployments. So yes, you can 100% be one person who does everything. But what I found is in development teams, you'd have the coders who are building the functionality, the business logic out and release and getting the code to the point of it's tested and ready to go to production. But another team would look after the DevOps, everything from security certificates to deployments to the pipelines that the automated deployments that take the code from GitHub and put it on servers and stuff. And I think that's where there's a level of massive naivety when it comes to micro SaaS, because even micro SaaS products or micro apps, they should all benefit from those well-established principles. Yeah, that's one thing that's going from here. So talks about two things. I'm aware the time is going to go off in a minute, and this is not my best one. I've recorded it because that's what I said I would do, and I'll stick to my promise, and I'll be consistent. So yeah, we talked about code audits. We've talked about command centers, and obviously the big thing about these micro apps as well is there's a thing called MCPs that I think I might have spoke about, but we definitely talk about on the podcast. And they're a bit like, an easy way to think of them is like USB-C ports, so like universal for LLMs. So it's a way that a service can connect to a large language model, i.e. for a lot of people, AI. And that's why these people are building these micro apps, is they then want to connect it to one of these solutions, one of these LLMs, and they want to do something with the data. And that's what we're observing a lot. So my timer keeps going off. It hasn't gone off there. So in terms of fears and everything, I wrote down some scribblings. I'm probably like got a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn at the moment. through my walks, I did a piece earlier this week on another like AI pulse on an event, and sort of talked about how I've been going for I've been going for walks every Monday, 90 minutes. And during that piece, I'll be able to create all of the content, ideas, and concepts for the entire week, just using dictation and tools like Whisper Flow. Get it all out of my head. It's when I seem to be, in my personality, the most creative I am. And then I have agents and processes that kick off and like create different versions. And then when I come back, I do, like I probably do my 10% time is before I go for the walk. What am I going to focus on? I go for the walk, I dictate, I record videos, I'll stop there, record videos, and then my agent picks it up and does the mass content creation exercise, like a content generator, really. And then I do my 10% review, because everything obviously I'm going to publish has come from my own ideas. It's just put into a structure. So why am I saying all this? Because I'm using LinkedIn. I'm posting on LinkedIn. I have a lot of people who I know, they're in my friendship network, who say, oh, I saw you on LinkedIn and all this. Whenever I go on LinkedIn, I can't scroll for longer than a minute. There's so much opinion, which is what I'm guilty of doing here. I totally accept that, but there's so much opinion on AI, and every single post is, we can help you with AI, and we should use this and don't use this, but it's all tactics. Everyone is talking about tactics and tools, and what they're missing are like the fundamental principles. And this just loops back to that client video I talked about to wrap up, that what they'd posed as a problem, the solution they were given was a tool, but it completely missed the root cause. It missed like the business problem. It missed asking the questions to unearth, well, why do you do that? And then once we understood that, then the principles of business and like just general being a good human being and relationships and trust kick in. And then you can go back and select the right tool. I don't know if that's made any sense, but what I'm observing a lot of is people jump straight to the AI tool or the tool, and they don't really use their brain and they don't do much thinking about why. And that's the fundamental thing, is if you're going to do something, anything, you should use your own brain, and then you should use AI as a multiplier to achieve things that I could never achieve if it wasn't for AI, in terms of the productivity and the content and the generation, everything else. But don't ever forget about, don't dumb down, is what I'm saying. Don't just be a passenger. Don't stop using your own initiative, your own ideas. It has to come from within, and then you can scale it back out with AI. I think that's probably where my head's at, is that I'm just seeing a lot of drivel, a lot of content on scale that to me is more like about creating 2,000 pieces of content of drivel and they don't care, versus like true opinion. And do you really think that? And would you stand by that? And are you authentic? So yeah, my time has gone. I feel very, very privileged to be able to record this and stand in front of you. Apologies for if it hasn't made a lot of sense. And episode 5 will be coming in a couple of weeks. And yeah, just have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of Friday.